Welcome to No More Carbon Copies. It's the podcast for high-performing leaders with big goals who feel stuck trying to reach the next level. At Vivera Leadership, we believe no two leaders are the same. The best leaders perform at their highest when they understand what makes them unique and stop trying to lead like someone else. This is where we explore how to see ourselves clearly, address self-sabotage, and lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. You don't need to be a copy, you just need to be you. Welcome to No More Carbon Copies.
Well, welcome to podcast number 2 with my good friend Vince Burens. For those who missed the first one, you missed a good conversation, so go back and listen to it. But Vince is a well-seasoned executive with experience in high levels of leadership in nonprofits and now leads a for-profit consulting organization. Or is the COO, right?
I'm
Title?
a COO.
CO?
Yeah, COO and senior consultant.
Yeah, senior consultants. So last episode, we talked a lot about the origination and kind of development of leadership through the years, how we see ourselves accurately. We talked a little about self-sabotage, feedback. We both love sports. We love the traditional American sports, but we also love soccer, which is the beautiful game. And so interested to talk about how you think about leadership when you think about the experience of the sport of soccer and the process of coaching, because I know you've coached for, many years. And I haven't coached recently, but coached a while back in the day. So what do you think about the soccer metaphor when it comes to thinking about soccer, thinking about leadership? How do you think they translate? What goes through your mind?
Yeah, when you had referenced wanting to talk about soccer and as sort of thinking about leadership, metaphor for leadership, I went back to a conversation I had with one of my really good friends who's an executive leader in an organization that does human-centered design. He's also a sports fan, and maybe about a decade or so ago, we're having a conversation, and he was like, I just can't get into soccer. Like, I just don't get it, And I was like, man, as a human-centered design person, I feel like you're totally missing the boat. Like, it is you. And he was like, really? Say more. Like, I said to him, I want you to watch an English Premier League match and watch a coach. Tell me what you notice. So the next time we talked, he was like, they're in a suit. They just sit there on the sideline. Every now and again, they get up and say something, but for the most part, they just sit there. And he was like, and that's why I don't get it. And I was like, no, that's why you should totally get it. And he was like, okay, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I said, look, what you learn in soccer is that your preparation is done in training, right?
Yeah.
The match is where you go express it, right? So really, as a soccer coach, you teach people to think more than you teach them to do anything else, because they've got 90 minutes where you can't joystick them, right? It's not American football where every 7 seconds we're stopping and I'm telling you what to do next, right?
Yeah.
In soccer, I can scream, 60 yards across the field to tell you to make a run. But at the end of the day, you're independent out there, but we've all got to move as one, right? And you've got to teach people how to think about, how do I do my job and do it well in a way where I have to be situational and I have to constantly process what's in front of me. And I've got to do it within unison within this team or it's all going to break down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have just always loved thinking about soccer as a metaphor for my leadership, in that, the way that I prefer to lead is not as an offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans where I'm calling a new play every 7 seconds. That probably hurts right now for you all, so I apologize. But, I don't like to think of it that way. I'm more of a let's figure it out before we get into the game. Then you go play, and then let's come back after you go play and talk about what worked and what didn't, right?
Yeah.
And that's the way that I'd prefer to lead. It's the way that you can only coach soccer that way. I think a lot of dads, when they coach 5-year-olds, they try to go the American football methodology, and that works only until they get to about 12, 10.
Yeah.
I think in my leadership, I love to pick the right people, pick the right players, right? Assess their gifts and abilities, assemble a team that kind of fills out what we need to do, thinking about all pieces of it, administrative, leadership, all those different pieces, and then talk about what we need to go do, and then let people go do it, right? And then having the coming in and going out, like, how's it going? Where are we? Where are we failing? Where are we succeeding? What do we need more of? What's our resource check? All of those kinds of pieces, and then sending people back out, right? It's more, I think, an empowerment methodology for leadership as opposed to what did Jim Collins call it in Good to Great? A level 4 leader was a king with many servants, and I just never functioned well that way. I think when I was younger, I needed it to look more like the way I thought it should look. Now I'm just much more outcome oriented of like, okay, what does it look like in the end for us? And I don't always mean that in profit and loss, though that's certainly important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but how do you build a healthy culture and a healthy organization? How do you have multiple bottom lines that aren't just how much money we make, but organizational culture, people
Yeah.
health, people development, all those kind of different bottom lines? Because I think that's a flourishing organization whether it's in the social sector or the for-profit world versus sort of that old school, I'm the boss. I was just saying this, my wife and I, one of our binge watches during COVID was Mad Men, the movie about
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah.
marketing
Julie
back 50s and 60s. My wife's from New York. So she really appreciated some of that, the culture. But there's this scene where Don Draper's working with one of his younger employees, and the younger employee is a creative, and she's talking about like, you're not using my ideas. Don Draper espouses that old school methodology where he says, look, this isn't about your feelings. This isn't about your creativity. I give you money. You give me ideas. That's it. That's all that's here. And that's a very sort of hierarchical way of understanding,
Yeah.
transactional way
Yeah.
versus a really sort of empowering, transformational, relational way of leading that I think is just much more effective in today's world.
Yeah. One of the things that I connect with on that is I always talk about the idea of get the best out of your team. They need to be free
Mm.
of fear. And so as a leader, as a coach, especially using soccer as a metaphor, you set people up so they know the structure, they know the boundaries, and they have freedom within that then to express and play their role. And then they can go do that without the micromanagement of a coach always just telling them what to do. And think about it is the idea of the complementary skill set that you have to have. Like you have to have complementary skill sets of the players. Like you select your team or for the situation, and then you have complementary skill sets. You don't play the same skill set is not the striker, not the playmaker, not the the destroyer in the back, is not the goalkeeper. These are different skill sets, and you're trying to optimize your opportunity by optimizing skill sets and putting them together. But they have to play within a framework, not just a framework of the game, but the framework in like, here's what we're trying to do. What I see a lot when you think about the American or traditional coaching models is that people try to create some really complex strategies, but their people can't execute the basics. So they're like, well, my team's not executing. It's like, because you've created a lot of aspirational, you've read some book, you've got this thing, and you're like, we're going to do it this way, but that there's no foundation underneath it for people to actually perform. And so they don't have the capabilities, confidence to actually perform. So they don't have the freedom. The leader goes like, why aren't we hitting our goals? Why aren't we doing this?
Yeah, we in the firm that I'm a part of now, part of my job is for some of our larger clients, I do strategic planning. And one of the questions we always ask is capacity to execute. You can write the greatest strategic plan in the world that no one will ever use. And the reason why is they just don't have the vision or the capacity to execute on it. And so, yeah, to your point, learn to walk before you can run, right? And I think that's true for leaders too. Sometimes leaders have huge visions, but they don't nearly have the people around them that can execute on it. So either how do you make that more bite-sized, or how do you bring it back to the ground a little bit to say, okay, let's get here before we can get there.
Yeah, I remember one of my college coaches. They win national championships at the Division III level, like they're really, really good. I went into for a session when I was coaching. I went and helped them work a camp, and I was paying attention to how they do it because they have repeated success. And so I was asking questions like, well, what's the keys to your success? And he said something. He said something really, really sad. He goes, it's not like strategy. The strategy is dependent on the ability of the team to execute. And so what we practice and focus on is the fundamentals. The fundamentals in soccer: can you pass and can you receive? That was it. Like, can you pass the ball? Can you receive the ball? And in a work context, it's kind of like, what are the fundamentals? Can I communicate? Like, can I listen? Can I, like, there's these kind of fundamentals that I find that we often assume leaders know that, and we kind of put them in leadership positions, but don't train them in actually how to lead, and they can't do those fundamentals. It's almost every organization that I talk with has that same issue where they don't have a common agreement on the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Do you find that true?
Oh, I remember hearing when I was younger, someone coaching a group of young leaders, which I was in that group at the time. And someone said, "Tell me what you think I need to do," speaking in a broader room, like, "What can I do to get promoted the quickest?" And the guy's response back was, "Get really good at email." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Like that, no one was expecting that. And what he was trying to get at was exactly what you're saying, which is good leaders respond well, they respond efficiently, they have an efficiency of their time that they understand, they have a way of communicating their care for the people and their vision for the future of the business. They know how to do those things, but they do them in a pretty simplistic way. Right. So yeah, no, I do think quite often we overcomplicate systems, we overcomplicate communication, and I think it's a big miss. And I think investors and nonprofit board members want that, and so it's a really, when I was leading a nonprofit, like I was always listening to board members talking about how they want this massive vision, and I felt really provoked to go in that direction quite often of like, how do I keep speaking as grandiose as I can, as opposed to really getting down to the brass tacks of just doing the basics well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes we take inspiration over substance with some regularity.
Yeah. I think that connects with the idea of, doing the basics well is like, if you do the small things really well, the score takes care of itself. The end game takes care of itself. But if you focus on the big stuff and you have inconsistency in the small things, it hinders everybody. So you have like a couple strong leaders among 6, and it's not going to work. It's got to be the alignment of the how we do things, the alignment and the culture, those kind of things. And to take that back to soccer, is the idea that if you haven't done that well in practice, if you haven't done that well in coaching, when you get to the game, it's going to be evident. It's going to be absolutely evident. And you can't hide from it. As a coach, you can't hide from the fact that you didn't set your team up well. You didn't give them what they needed. Yeah, that's good. Do you find is that the only sport that you look to when you look at like that metaphor?
Well, I think, the other sport I think about that I love a great deal is professional hockey, ice hockey, and it's again another match, even though, they're coming in and off the ice in 1-minute shifts, there's a fluidity to the game and a speed to the game that, yes, they're drawing things up and there are set plays and things like that, just like in soccer. The majority of it is the fluidity of 5 moving as 1, really.
Yeah.
And you can see the break because the game is so fast, even more so than soccer. When there's a breakdown, the breakdown can turn tragic quickly.
Yeah.
Because of the speed of it, and if everybody's not on the same page. And I think to your point, I think in leadership, when people are, especially in the dispersed workforces that we have now, where so many people are on Zoom, so many people are working from home, if you're not communicating well, if you're not getting people on the same page, people can, I'll call it, go unintentionally rogue very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think for most people, it's not a desire to go rogue. It's a desire to do well, not being trained well or managed well. And then they're in a situation where they've got to make a decision. And so they do. And that's where, thinking of the hockey analogy, if the one defenseman decides to pinch in and the other defenseman doesn't, now all of a sudden you got a gap. Now you got a breakaway.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way, it's even more important. The firm that I work for now, our CEO really pays attention to organizational culture. Spends more than which is always the temptation, right? Spends more than our CFO would ever like on building organizational culture. But I love our CFO and I totally affirm our CEO's decisions. And part of the reason we do a week-long retreat with spouses every year as an organization. And the reason why is, we're a dispersed workforce. We're based in St. Augustine, Florida, but grand majority of the employees just live all over the country. Like I said, I live in Pittsburgh. But it's an opportunity to build the culture of the organization and to train and to communicate and to get everybody on the same page. I just think those kinds of things in today's world are just invaluable when many of us aren't sitting around the proverbial water cooler the way we used to.
Yeah. I love that, that focus. I think one of the things I noticed about hockey, I'm not as aficionado as hockey as much as you are, but I love the fluidity of the game. But one of the things that makes me think about, as you're talking about, is how organizations respond instantaneously to poor decisions. And so, it's like, what allows an organization to recover from an individual who makes a well-meaning, but a decision that goes bad or something like, what happens, what allows the organization It's the fluidity of the other players to adjust, to compensate, and to go like, oh, we've got your back. We're going to adjust because you maybe stepped outside our kind of structure a little bit, but we're going to respond quickly and adjust versus the idea of like, you made a mistake and we're going to call you out. And there's this idea of like that relational connection you're talking about gives you compassion. It gives you a sense of relational connection that allows you to then to do that adjustment that isn't a finger pointing adjustment, but it's like, hey, yeah, we acknowledge a mistake, but we're going to adjust. We're going to take care of things, and then we can come back and get back on the same page.
Yeah. And you're making me think of another mentor in my life. It's funny to call him a mentor. I think we're the same age. He's at least a voice of wisdom in my life. A guy named Jay Brown, who was the CEO of Crown Castle down in Houston. He's now the CEO of Weekly Homes, which is one of the largest home building companies in the U.S. And I've been fortunate to be able to spend some time with Jay over the last handful of years. And one of the things that he often talks about is great leaders don't catastrophize situations. He often says, I view myself as being on a ship, and the job of the leader is not to look at the waves, but look at the horizon. And I think, to your point, if things go sideways and we start pointing fingers, we're creating catastrophe. We're giving energy to catastrophe, right? As opposed to saying, how do I horizon, take the big picture into account and say, okay, how do I hold you accountable, but do it appropriately? I think there's a lot of inappropriate accountability, right? Of just like, I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. Well, if you've got a bunch of employees, you got to hold their feet to the fire. You got the wrong employees, right?
Absolutely.
I don't think that's an accountability issue. That's a
No.
hiring issue.
No.
And so if you always have to lean into that, if you got to lean into all the time, like accountability, you got the wrong people. So I think if you've got the right people, yes, you got to hold them accountable, but it's much more about keeping the calm, looking to the horizon, solving the problem, moving forward.
Yeah. So you just like bring up the idea of accountability. I don't want to go on a rant, but I don't personally believe in accountability. I think it's misused, like in the traditional sense of accountability. Like if you come and you say, hey, Roger, you committed to doing this and you didn't do it, I'm going to hold you accountable. You can step towards me, but what makes it work is my request that you do that. If I don't request you to do that, it's just noise. And I think we rely on authority structures, especially when we rely on formal authority for accountability, top down, without the people in the roles saying, no, I want this, and they're asking for it. Accountability just kind of rolls off. But I think that so many, I can hear it all the time. Like, you got to hold your sales team accountable. You got to hold your people accountable. Like, it's like, well, if you didn't at the front end of this set up a structure where they said, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's what I want to do. Here's how it fits into the large organization. Yes, I want to be coached. I want to be helped to do that. Then accountability works. But I think that the top-down kind of view of it is exactly what you said. Like, if you rely on that as a leader, you've got the wrong people, and you probably have set up the goal setting. You've probably set up the organization in a way that those people don't own their roles. They don't want it. Do you like, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, right. It's either a hiring issue or a lack of clarity issue. You know, I've been a part of organizations and systems where we find really good people. We don't make it really clear what we expect of them. They don't meet our unspoken expectations.
There you go. Yeah.
And we then come back and want to hold them accountable for the things they're not doing that were either unclear or poorly communicated or never told. And then, we're going, well, what the heck's wrong with Roger? I thought we hired a great guy. Well, maybe you did hire a great guy. You just didn't make it clear to him what you wanted. And now when he's not meeting the expectation, and one of the questions that I always ask when I'm a teammate to someone in a hiring process is a question I had a good friend who was a corporate headhunter. And when I was hiring a lot in my previous job, I said to him, what questions you always ask? And he said, I'll tell you my favorite question. And his favorite question was, when he's interviewing somebody, was, if we hired you and 2 years from now, you quit or we had to fire you because it just went really wrong, what do you think would have happened? Why do you think it didn't work?
Great question.
And obviously what he's pointing at there is let's deal with the issues before they're issues, right?
Yeah.
Is a lack of clarity. Actually, I think I understand the job description, but I don't. I think I understand what you want me to do, but I don't.
Yeah.
Like, even though the job description has a bunch of nice words in it, at the end of the day, there's really two things you got to do here to succeed, and it's this. And we
Yeah.
didn't define those clearly enough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I really like that as a way of doing it, because then the onus gets put back on the employee more, as opposed to, well, now I got to hold you accountable because
Yeah.
you're underfunctioning.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an ownership there that is clear from the get-go. I love that. That's a great question. Uh, the idea that you, as a leader, have to clarify what you want from people makes me think of, I've got several of my clients, and one of the repeated conversations is when they're talking about an employee is, what do they think their job is?
Mm,
What do you think their job is? If I ask them to put it out there, would it match what you say? Or just what you said, like, are the assumptions you have the same as their assumptions? Or especially for like people in leadership positions, typically they're high achieving, they're typically intelligent. They typically have a perspective. They have a drivers. But not all of them are good at taking their unspoken expectations and translating that into something that their people can understand.
Yeah.
Their people can go like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And then as a employee, the job of the employee, I like to switch this around and instead of employee, like you said, like have the employee own it, is I like to tell people, as the employee, your job is to interview the people that you're working for and making sure you know what they want you to do. Don't wait for them to tell you. Like, you take ownership of that.
Yeah.
And then ask, do I have the skill set to do it or not? What do I need?
Yeah.
And then boldly ask for that, like, or switch roles. Yeah, that's good stuff. So let's talk a little about your experience. You worked in a long time in nonprofits. You work in a for-profit. You're consulting, so you have a view into a lot of organizations. Like, talk a little about what you notice. Where does, in your world, which is strategy and fundraising, what do you notice that what are some of the trends, thoughts, takeaways? What are like some of the most important for people who aren't in the room with you, don't have your experience and can't see what you see? What do you think that they should know? What do you think would be some of the wisdom you have for us?
Well, I would say, and thanks for explaining all that, teeing it up for me. Just to clarify on fundraising, I always joke and say I'm not the guy who helps you with hoagie sales, right? Like, I'm the guy that we
let's be clear.
we do come in and do very large capital campaign fundraisers. So
Yeah.
10, 20.
Yeah, let's be clear. Let's just say it clearly. We're talking about major multi-million dollars engagements where people are trying to change the world and they need a lot
of money.
So the strategy, we're not talking about selling Girl Scout cookies. No offense to Girl Scouts.
Hey, my daughter sold Girl Scout cookies for 10 years. I'm all in. But that's right. I couldn't give you much advice on that. But
right.
So I would say a few things. One is people give to vision, and people are committed and follow vision, right? Mm-hmm. But that fades quickly without really good strategy and really good people, is what I would say. People think, well, in order to raise, I have a client right now, it's in the process of raising about $150 million for a project they're doing. They've got a really good visionary leader. But he's also got some really good tacticians underneath him. People want to know the impact, and it's impact investing, right? It's the same kind of thing. People want to know, like, what's my ROI here, and can I really believe that you're going to deliver on your promises, not just make the promises in a winsome way. People always give, I would say, even investors, whether they'll acknowledge it or not, to a certain degree, it's always got to be a gut and heart check, right? Of like, do I really trust the people? One of the things we always say is people give to people they know and trust. And I think that's true in business. It's true in philanthropy. Like, if I know you and I trust you, I'm more inclined to believe your data than if your data is amazing and your vision's amazing, but I just don't trust your integrity. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the things that I would pay attention to. I would encourage, like philanthropy in the US and beyond, we now work with many nonprofits not based in the US, is going really well, especially faith-based philanthropy for those of you that are more inclined in that direction. The trends would say people want to go deep and they want to partner with the philanthropies they work with. And so we help organizations make people truly partners, not just donors. But I would say, at the board level, board members are trying to go more deep. I think I would say to you, if you're a for-profit leader and you're involved in not-for-profit boards, recognize that leading is a little different right? Just because you're a great oil and gas CEO, that doesn't mean that you know everything about leading big brothers, big sisters in your community, right?
Mm. Yeah.
I think that's a miss that we see sometimes is people want to give back, people who have done well in business and they're leaders and they want to sink their teeth into something else that's like giving back to the community, giving back to their church, whatever it might be. And they assume that they have the same competency in their day job as they do here. And
Yeah.
that's often, I would say that's a massive blind spot that I see with boards with some regularity. And that can be a challenge because they're the ones that are donating. So it's
Yeah.
hard for the CEO, executive director of the nonprofit to be able to push back to,
Yeah.
but it's a massive blind spot that we see with some
So you've talked about two things: the strength of pushing back against people who have something you need, like that's a competency on the nonprofit leadership side to go, hey, I really am going to protect the culture, I'm protect the organization, I'm going to lead effectively. But there is that translation. Like, what is different? Like, what do you notice about people successful in the business, kind of the for-profit business driver kind of world, when they step into the nonprofit or the service sector, or what doesn't translate? What do you think is the biggest gap between the way they have operated effectively and what their expectations are for how that should work for the organization they're giving money to? What is the gap there?
You know,
Or what are parts of the gap?
I referenced you know, an old business book. I'll reference the same old business book. The aha that I had on this topic was when I read Jim Collins' Good to Great many, many years ago, and he wrote he called it a monograph for the social sector, is what he called it. And in there, he talked about that people that work, that are employees in the social sector, are motivated and wired like volunteers. So even though they collect a paycheck and they are paid employees, their heart wiring is one of a volunteer mentality. And I think the big disconnect is that when we bring for-profit business practices in their totality, I'm not saying they're implicitly, there's not a one-to-one there. I think there's a lot that the for-profit community can share with the not-for-profit community to make it better, more efficient, more viable, produce more on its mission. But there are elements of it where there is that, going back to that Don Draper quote, like, I give you money, you do work, right?
Yeah.
Nonprofit people are not wired that way, even at the top levels, right? They're like presidents of colleges. Yes, they make very high 6-figure salaries, in some cases 7-figure salaries, but they're wired around a mission and a vision and a particular academic understanding of the world, right? It's not the same as someone trying to deliver to a VC company on their investment.
Right.
And so I think where the miss is people, it's a little bit of what I was saying earlier on learning the new golf swing. Like, just because I can swing a golf club really well, which, as I've confessed, I can't the way that I used to, but even because I can, doesn't mean it's going to translate to me being a good hockey player, even though both of them are swinging sticks, right?
Yeah. Good
And I
analogy.
think sometimes we just think, I'm an all-world hockey player, so of course I can be a scratch golfer. Well, maybe there's definitely some translatable skills in there. But at the end of the day, like, are you going to acknowledge this is a different game and I need a different swing and a different understanding? And can I really humble myself to put myself before certain people to say, like, actually, I need better understanding. I need to understand the context. I need to understand this industry because it's a different industry.
Yeah.
Can I humble myself, or is it a blind spot that I just have a belief that I'm really good at this and there's nothing new under the sun? I think that's the gap where I see. And to your point, it takes the courageous on the other side, the courageous nonprofit leader, to actually say, hey, we're not just looking for intellect and money here. We're actually looking for true wisdom.
Yeah.
And if you're not a wise person, not just a bright person, not just an accomplished person, but a wise person, there's a lot of ways we could partner with you, but I don't know if being at the board level is going to be the best fit for you.
Yeah. And as a leader of a nonprofit, I know a lot of wisdom about how you select board members and what their roles are and the strategy for doing that. But I think that to go up, like, if you, like what you said is brilliant. But if you step up above that, I feel like I hear you say, like, someone who's come up in the for-profit leadership kind of realm, they've done those things in that realm, and then they jump over as a board member, as investor in a nonprofit, and all the foundational stuff they did to get where they got to be really successful, they don't redo. So they did pay attention to people's motivation, because you can't run a successful business unless you You pay attention to your people and their motivation and all those things, but they don't take the time to go back to the basics when they get into that world. That's interesting because the leadership principles aren't that much different, but the people are very different. The humans in there are different. So have to know your people. How are they motivated? Are they motivated by money? Are they motivated by mission and other ways too? So interesting. That's interesting. Any other kind of aha moments for you as you stepped into that consulting role and now are in some ways an unbiased, you're a partner, right? But you're in some ways an unbiased thought partner and consultant. Any other thoughts you have about leadership and what is the difference between strong visionary leaders and successful nonprofits with good boards, and where do you see organizations struggle?
Well, I mean, one of the things is you have to be pulling the rope in the same direction, right? And I think where you have sort of either board members or staff or leaders that are not all pulling on the same direction. We always say with strategic planning, a mediocre plan well executed is much better than the most savvy, elegant plan never touched. And I think it's the same thing with nonprofit leadership and for-profit leadership, candidly. But you'd almost rather have mediocre talent that all believe the same thing, that we're going after the same principles and trying to do it shoulder to shoulder, versus all the smartest people in the room that all had their own agenda.
Yeah.
And I think that's cohesion, commitment to mission, commitment to culture. All of those things, I think, make a for-profit, and certainly when we see not-for-profits move forward, those are the things that we see that are most critical. Is everyone on the same page? If not, what's the way to get them on the same page, or to have an off-ramp for the people who are not on the same page? And it's hard because I would say the other thing we see with not-for-profits is a scarcity mindset. So they don't come in with a mindset of abundance thinking, well, there's plenty of resources available. They think this is all I've got and I've got to fight to keep what I have.
Yeah.
And when you bring that mindset as a nonprofit leader, it's really hard to grow and expand, because you're always, well, we can't get rid of this person because we'll never find somebody else. Well, we can't lose that donor because there's just not enough money out there. Right. Yeah. And the more you bring that mindset, and I would say that's, it's true for us personally, right? As leaders, like the more that I bring a scarcity mindset, I can't lose this job because there aren't any others out there. Right. I can't make that decision, because if I fail, then what's that mean about me? Or what's the board going to think? Or what's my leadership team going to think? And the more we lead with a scarcity mindset, that trickles down to all of our employees, and it trickles down and up.
Yeah.
So I think we push people to have an abundance mindset, to say, no, I mean, you can always get more resources. You can always find more people. Let's not be cavalier about it. Let's not be arrogant, but let's also engage the world in such a way where we're leading with some freedom here, as opposed to feeling like there's only so much and I've got to fight to keep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the death that's caused by fear, that causes people to see everything as risks that are going to kill them, rather than risks that are going to stretch them, rather than risks that are worth taking. And it just stifles anything that could happen in terms of on the growth side. That's good stuff. I would say things that I believe strongly is that in leadership development, we spend traditionally, and what I've seen in mostly corporate America, most of my experience, I did work in nonprofit at the beginning when I worked with you, but most of my experience is in the for-profit corporate world. I would say the models for leadership development are very much aspirational, like in terms of, here's the mold, squeeze yourself into that mold. And I think that's the biggest mistake ever when it comes to leadership. We have to have a different paradigm where we're not trying to squeeze everybody into a singular mold, but we need to really help people understand their unique competence, and then how they build their role in their organization around that, to leverage their strengths, not just compensate for their weaknesses. And I'm curious, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you see that played out?
Yeah. I'm in my job, it's interesting. My formal work is not to be an executive coach, but I do a lot of executive coaching. It just ends up being part of the job. And when when you're someone's fundraising consultant, it's more intimate in leadership than you would imagine, right? I mean,
you're their confidant. Yeah, you're their consigliere. Yeah.
And they're able to say things to you about, like, I got to get $25 million. I don't know how I'm going to do that. And I can't tell my team I don't know how I'm going to do it. And so it just kind of opens up a vulnerability in the conversation. And I'm currently coaching a CEO right now. I'm helping them raise their significant tens of millions of dollars goal. But part of the conversation that I'm having with him is exactly what you just said, which is he's in this role. A handful of the board members want him to fit this archetype of a CEO that they think it should be.
Yeah.
And, you have to function this way. You have to think about these things. You got to work on these things. And it's good stuff. It's all very helpful feedback. But at the end of the day, I always push him to say, like, you're in this role. You are in this role for a reason. Who are you?
Yeah.
If you've got to completely shapeshift yourself into something else, you probably shouldn't be in that job. Right. In order to succeed in it. People are going to give you the feedback. Well, a good CEO does this, a good leader does that, a little bit of that personality assessment testing that you and I were talking about earlier, of like actually the fully self-realized leader. I actually remember when you and I went through that now 20 some odd years ago, I remember it compared different leaders in the organization that we were a part of. And one of the people that was like the most self-actualized leader was like one of the most ineffective people in the entire organization, but they were the best leader. Right.
Yeah.
I kind of think about that of like, it was trying to draw you into an archetype. And I don't say that to be negative about that person. It was just a reminder to me of like, these things have biases and we have biases on what, like, is it Bill Gates? Is it Elon Musk? Like, who's your ideal CEO? And then like, let's construct people to it, as opposed to saying, no, I'm in this role. And if I'm going to fail, I want to fail being me. So I feel like I left it out there, as opposed to, I will say, early in my leadership journey, when I first became a CEO, I was getting a lot of voices to me telling me what it meant to be a CEO. And because one of the sort of negative sides of that Enneagram 3 personality type is you can be a shapeshifter. You can kind of be a chameleon.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned about myself is I'm actually pretty good at being a chameleon. So I'm pretty good at kind of being what you need me to be. But you can lose yourself pretty quickly when you're willing to be a chameleon all the time. I mean, there are appropriate moments for us to acquiesce within a particular culture and to be trained. But at the same time, you've got to fully express who you are in the leadership role. And if it works, great, and grow into it. And if it doesn't, find a different gig. Have a set of abundance,
Yeah. I remember that brings me back to I would say, in retrospect, I didn't understand it when I was there, but there was a season of life where for about 5 years, I worked underneath a leader that had a certain drive, had a certain way of doing things, and was constantly trying to pull me into that style. And I did everything I could to fit that mold. I like, it was miserable. And it was absolutely miserable. By the end of that time period, I was like, what is wrong with me? And I started to resent, the leader I was working for. It was just so unhealthy, but a great learning moment for me to point to go, you're doing everything you can to be someone that you're not. And you weren't that effective. Like, I wasn't as effective as I was when I shifted roles and started being me. The impact was just astronomical. But as a young leader, as a young guy, I didn't see it. I did not see it. And that's why I think, like, since we don't see ourselves out, that's one of the things that this maybe a third conversation we have about how do you use assessment tools? Because one of my critiques of assessment tools is that most of the time they ask you questions, which is great if you see yourself accurately. But if you don't see yourself accurately, like if I took back assessments when I was in that role, they look totally different. So assessments, I think, have to be you have to really guide people well to understand those or participate in those, because since we don't see ourselves accurately, we project ourselves, a false image of ourselves, into an assessment that then tells us, oh, this must be true about me.
Yeah. I'm actually working with a leader right now who it would take you 30 seconds to spend the high driving, high achieving individualist. Super high driving, super high achieving, clearly an individualist. The organization that he works with just did a group, like the leadership team did a retreat and they did the personality assessment. His thing came back as team leader, committed to the team, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm like, you're reading it and you're like, that can't be about that person. Yeah. And what he did was essentially he answered the questions in a way that he knew. I mean, it might have been subconscious. I don't even know if it was top of his mind, but it was
Yeah.
like, I know what I'm supposed to be to do this job, and that's the way I'm
Yeah.
going to answer these questions.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's like cares about the team over the individual. It's like, that's not you. So I do think you're right. That each of them are a data point. I think sometimes
Yeah.
we go full bore on them of like I've referenced the Enneagram a couple of times. I've used predictive index. I've used a handful of others. Like I think if we can connect all the data points, we get more of a fully orbed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think, you were talking about feedback before. I think something that's a really effective tool, but unfortunately gets weaponized, are 360 reviews. They can be really effective feedback tools as long as it's not um, hey, here's a way for everybody to go back to Seinfeld. It's the
Yeah.
airing of grievances, right? Like it's just a way for everybody to tell you how bad you are. Well, that makes them ineffective tools.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I've been on the giving and receiving side of that, and which is why I think 360 tools, and I do these for my clients. I'm sure you do the same. But I have very clear criteria on who can participate in that feedback. The person who is receiving the feedback has to know that those people who are speaking into that love them. They love them, and they want the best for them. And if that's true, you can get some great transformational feedback.
Totally.
But if there's any hint that just any bit of that feedback is tainted by someone that you don't trust, it can't be accepted, can't be trusted. I think that's a big failure. I think when people go like, we do these mass 360s where like, everybody's going to get a 360, everybody's going to get on a survey, and everybody's going to respond to all their coworkers. And you're like, well, why doesn't that work? Why doesn't that create transformation? It's because of lack of trust.
Oh, totally.
And it's confirmation bias in the sense that if I want something to be true and one person says it, I'll jump on that. I ignore all the other stuff because I don't know where it came from, don't know what the context was. I really think that kind of way of doing is not really effective for high-level leaders. Well, thank you very much for the conversation. We talk a lot about books. One of the books that you recommended me years ago, I still read, called A Failure of Nerve, like one of my favorite books. What book have you read or are you reading now that you would recommend?
I'm on I referenced the Arthur Brooks. He's written a couple of great books about really understanding joy and happiness. And for those of you that are in that middle season of life, he calls it you don't have a midlife crisis, you're in the midlife chrysalis. You're the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, which feels a little too ooey gooey for me, but I appreciate the metaphor. So, I think some of the things by Arthur Brooks have been really good. I will say that I'm in a season, again, recognizing this midlife transition that I'm in my leadership, not just in life, but in my leadership, of really reading books about leaders. I've appreciated biographies and autobiographies. I've been on a run of like from Bruce Springsteen, who's fascinating, to Dwight Eisenhower, to Lincoln. I'm a people person by nature, and I love reading and maybe even projecting into hearing their lives and understanding what they were thinking. I mean, I just finished a biography on Lincoln, where Lincoln, you may know this story, but so the contents of what was on Lincoln's body when he was assassinated was not released by the Smithsonian or whomever had it up until about 20 years ago, I think. And one of the things that Lincoln had in his wallet, I mean, he had a lot of the stereotypical things you think you might have, but he had in his wallet, he had 8 news clippings of reporters saying positive things about him, which I thought here's one of the most iconic, beloved leaders in American history, who even he had to have, like, he saved news clippings and put them in his wallet to read, to like communicate, like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Like even Abraham Lincoln had to do that.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, it's like little nuggets like that I take away from those kinds of biographies to remember, they were human, and these are certain things that are just human needs that we all have, and to feel okay about them in your leadership.
Yeah. That's a great connection, because you referenced the school principal getting tears in her eyes when you gave her how much you appreciated her. I experience that all the time when you breathe truth into people, or when someone encourages me, the amount of value, the amount of the importance of being spoken to, like it's human. And most of us go days. Sometimes some people go years without ever hearing those things. Well, thanks, Vince. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast in the future, but thank you so much. Really appreciate you having a conversation with me.
Awesome. It was really fun. I can't believe how quickly it all went by.
Thanks, Vince. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to No More Carbon Copies. If today's episode challenged your thinking or sparked a new idea, we'd love for you to share it or leave a review. And if you want to go deeper, take the free Leadership Blind Spots Diagnostic. It's a quick tool that helps you identify the hidden patterns holding you back and gives you practical insight to grow your leadership and your team. Just head to viveroleadership.com/diagnostic or use the QR code on the screen to take it now. We'll see you next time. Until then, lead true.